Awesome. All right. Well, uh, welcome everyone to another Giant Leap podcast, if you can call it that. We've had three of these so far, so I guess once we get to 10, we can officially call ourselves a podcast. We've got Loaf from Loot Realms joining us today, and we're just going to have a chat. The point of these conversations is really to help myself and Maresh learn about what other cool people are doing in the nascent space of on-chain gaming. So it's always good to talk to people who know a lot more, have been doing it a lot more than we have. So welcome to the show, Loaf.
Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Now, the Aussie accent obviously is hard to
Yeah,
find. Another fellow builder in Australia.
we're in harmony now.
We're synced up.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually talking to Maresh the other day, and I think in general in crypto, we kind of bat above our grade, don't we, in terms of Aussies doing stuff in crypto and Web3. There's been a few of us over the past few years.
Mm. Yeah, we got a good little crew. I have to admit though, I was definitely a bit of a lone wolf for a long time. Um, so I didn't really know anyone until I started this project. But yeah, I mean, we got Immutable, we've got the Lyra Finance guys, we've got you guys, we've got myself, and some of the Realms team. Although there's um, we're kind of spread out everywhere. Um, There's
Yeah,
only a couple of Australians.
definitely, definitely.
Mm.
So that's probably a good way to sort of give us a bit of background about how you got started in
Mm.
crypto. You mentioned you maybe did some stuff before on-chain gaming, so tell us a bit about
Mm.
your journey.
Yeah, so I've been a long time crypto investor, probably since like 2015, 2014. I remember buying Bitcoin back then. I think I got pilled by one of Balaji's MIT talks about Bitcoin. Um, and so, I've been I've been the disciple and of crypto since then. And my philosophy around this whole, you know, like why we do what we do or why we should do what we do is that we like blockchains exist to remove trusted third parties. That's like their number one thing. It's like you can verify stuff without a trusted third party. Throughout human history, that's what we've had. We've had these institutions that have sat in that position, and blockchains remove that. And so everything that I do, everything that I build, will be about removing a third party. Um, and I think we would have lost the vision of blockchains and crypto in general if if this space evolves to just repeat the past. So yeah, that's kind of why I'm here. Um, but outside of crypto, I've kind of been a builder and like a engineer and company builder for the past 10 years. I've done and I kind of wrote a bit of Solidity back in 2016, but then I decided not to do it. That was probably a bit of a mistake, but whatever. Um, uh, um, but yeah, I've kind of been building, full stack apps from DevOps to client to, UX, UI, everything in between. Um, and then, I kind of watched in 2017, everything go up, down, and I'm like, it's going to come back. It's just, crypto's a cycle. So, I kind of just sat on the sidelines for a bit, and then, 2019 happened, 2018, um, you know, Uniswap happens, DeFi starts to kick off. And I'm like, okay, stuff's getting interesting again. Now you can do stuff with this. It's not just really speculative L1 plays. Everyone's trying to figure out like, what do you do on a blockchain? And then, Uniswap comes along and it's like, well, this is actually, you can do this crazy decentralized finance stuff. So that kind of got me back in the ring. I was kind of fooling around, but I was pretty busy in real life work, so I didn't really dive headfirst into stuff. Um, and then I dabbled around for a bit. Nothing really took my fancy to go all in on. And then fast forward, NFTs happen, all that, and then loot happens. Um, and loot happens what in August 21. And I kind of ignored it for the first couple of days, and then I kind of realized, then I kind of dived in, and it kind of got me thinking. I'm like, this whole idea around a, fully decentralized, open source, open narrative building world, just totally nerd sniped me. And so then I kind of, on the weekend after Loot launched, with a co-founder of mine, we just decided to make a website. We're like, let's just build a website, make a subgraph, and like graph all the loot stuff together, and then see what happens. And so that was called Bibliotheca for Loot. Nothing was really formed then. We didn't have a plan for game or anything. Um, and yeah, we kind of got talking with the rest of everyone else that was in the Loot community, and we started adding more projects to the site, and then we linked up with the Realms dev. I didn't actually deploy the Realms contract. We linked up with the Realms developer who just launched Realms, and we're like, let's merge teams and like try and build this game that everyone, that's Loot's meant to be, because everyone was just popping like crappy derivatives at that point. Some were great, some, were just, dirty crash grabs. But I'm like, well, let's not do that. Let's not just do another derivative. Let's try and make a game. And so then we kind of set out to be, set out to try and make a game using Loot and using Realms, and potentially some other derivatives. And we kind of formulated like, okay, let's create a resource management game running on chain, running on Arbitrum, way back, like before Arbitrum was even like, when it really had that old school bridge going. You've been using it for a while if you remember that old school bridge. Um, and we built the first game using the Diamond standard contract, and I kind of spent like 2 months heads down building this thing, and we kind of got to the finish line. Not the finish line, just like MVP. And a lot of the stuff that I was trying to do, um, I was just hitting a lot of hard constraints with the EVM. Now that could have been just because of the architectural design of the Diamond Standard. Just hitting these constraints. You can push EVM a lot, but I started to realize, like, if I really want to build a expansive, ever evolving, like hyperstructure type world, then we need a lot of headspace. And the Arbitrum just wasn't going to give it to us back then. Now that might have changed now, but back then it didn't. And so, we kind of released an alpha to like 30, 40 people, and I was kind of like playing around, mining resources and attacking each other and stuff. It was pretty crude compared to what we are now. But it just kept breaking. We kept hitting like stack trace limits. The cost to actually do a transaction was going to be way too high. So I was like, this isn't just good. This isn't going to work. And so we just decided, like, well, at that time actually, like Starknet kind of was on the radar because people were doing some pretty crazy physics simulations on it. It's like, well, let's go down that hole, and then you go down the rabbit hole of what Starks are and like what Starknet is, um, and it kind of clicked in my head. I'm like I think the EVM machine is it's great for like low powered script, like little money scripts. It's very, you can create these really nice decentralized networks with it, but it's very constrained in what you if you really want to make very very complex high compute programs, like that's not what it's designed to be, and I don't think it ever will be. I mean, maybe I'll be proved wrong, but anyway. Um, and I realized, like, okay, these guys are building this totally different VM using this new language called Cairo that that basically creates these little circuits that then get proved and verified. And so that technology really just sniped me. I'm like, okay, this is early right now, but like these guys are true gigabrains. They basically wrote the book on what zero knowledge is. So let's take a risk and go with this platform, and build on it. And so yeah, fast forward 9 months from now, we rebuilt the whole game in Cairo, and well, no, a year. And yeah, we have a functioning alpha now, being played by anybody that wants to come to the Discord. It's full of bugs, but it's getting there. But it's a pretty ambitious project. So but yeah, sorry, I kind of rabbled on for a bit, but yeah, that's
No,
kind
no,
of where I am.
that's a really good dive into sort of how you've arrived
Mm.
from here. I know Maresh is itching to ask you some questions about Starknet and Cairo because we're having these kinds of discussions
Mm.
internally ourselves. But before I let him bombard you with those questions, I did have to ask in terms of the early community building. Do you think
Mm.
being part of Loot, um, you know, was that really helpful in terms of getting that initial community, or do you think you could have just built a fun enough on-chain game and then built a community from then on?
I mean, you probably definitely could have. Loot definitely supercharged it. And Loot's kind of got a positives and negatives about it. The way that kind of got kind of had the VC kiss of death. Well, that's kind of what happened to the NFTs. But yeah, it definitely jump started a whole community movement because it was like this shared ideal that everyone could rally behind. Um, but yeah, it's definitely possible, of course, to build a community from scratch, building around a fun NFT game,
Yeah.
fun on-chain game.
And do you think you have to sell NFTs as part of that process, or do you think NFT should be a byproduct of the game itself?
Well, depends how much funding you have, I guess. Um,
Yeah.
NFTs are a great funding platform. If you want to raise, like a miniature, amount of funding to get the first product off the ground, it's a great platform to do that. So yeah, I mean, you don't have to do it, and it definitely shouldn't be a speculative play. Like everything that we've tried to do, we've tried to avoid the whole speculative aspect of everything. This is like, I think you need to build a community around, a core set of ideas and not a price. And if your whole community is just built around price,
Yeah.
then as soon as the price goes down, then everyone goes because
Yeah.
that's all that
Mm,
was built on.
Mm.
mm.
So you kind of get a slower growth pattern, but it's a much richer, like denser, binding community.
Absolutely, absolutely. And were you guys ever tempted to, because you guys were pretty early in the whole on-chain gaming stuff, especially when you started, were you ever tempted to just say, okay, let's make a Web 2.5 game and just integrate these loot NFTs in there? Because that's what everyone else does,
Yeah.
especially when they want to make something a bit faster, right? Like, obviously you've got conviction about on-chain gaming, but like at the time, is that a path that you thought about at all?
No, not at all. I mean, when I said mentioned was how I got here, that whole idea around removing a trusted third party, that's like why I build in this space.
Mm.
I'm not building this thing just to replicate Web two. Like it's the harder path, but it's the it's the path that has longevity in my mind. I mean, if you're not doing that, then I just don't even see the point. Like, go
Yeah.
and make a Web two game.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know. Uh,
Yeah.
so
I totally agree on that. Yeah.
mm.
Amresh, you can ask your Starkware questions now.
Like, see, I want us to be cognizant about how much technical we get into this particular
No,
part.
this is purely for us, okay? The nerds will
Uh,
get it. The nerds who watch this
Yeah,
will get it. It's not
we're in a niche
it's
within a niche right now.
exactly.
It's
It's not a
it's like
marketing video, so
yeah,
let's just talk about
yeah, yeah,
whatever we
no.
want.
I think I had exchanged a few Twitter messages with you regarding the decision between going
mm,
to Stark versus staying to EVM. I think we probably are at the same stage where you were when you made that decision.
mm,
I haven't yet made a conclusive decision on that yet
mm,
because uh, since you did it, probably some new technologies have emerged.
mm.
There is I don't know whether you have been following what the mud guys have been doing from
Yeah,
Lattice.
yeah, no, very very closely. I think what they've
Yeah,
done is amazing. They've
yeah.
really kind of leapfrogged the this whole on-chain scene forward.
Mm, mm,
I felt like I was shouting against the wall for a while.
mm.
Um, but yeah, that. But yeah,
So we are basically using mud client and we are using the ECS framework, but the
yeah,
ECS framework is hardly a monopoly of EVMs or like
mm,
yeah, it's just a coding framework. Uh, but they also have this theoretical or like lined up partnership with the Optimism
yeah,
guys,
yeah,
and they
yeah.
have
Bedrock.
Bedrock,
Yeah.
using which they propose that they will develop or they will enable development of app chains.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that will, by any means,
Mm,
help resolve some of the
mm,
stack to deep errors,
Yeah, this
which
is a
high compute calculations?
yeah, this is I mean
Yeah.
this is definitely the meta right now. I mean, I spent a
Yeah.
lot of my day thinking about this
Mm,
because I think the jury's definitely still out like
mm,
where it all heads, but
mm,
like I mean I see a path towards either L3s as like app specific chains, or
mm,
Bedrock itself, which is really like an actually L2 specific like stack. Although you could
mm,
actually run it on Optimism or any other EVM chain to get like super low fees. Um, I'm not. I definitely can't speak for experience. I haven't played around with the Bedrock stack, but I've heard
mm,
pretty crazy things. But yeah, so I don't know how constrained it is to like what you can, how you can push it to its limit. I think maybe you guys should try push it to its absolute limit. I mean,
Right.
and I haven't read any articles, but I'm pretty sure it only got released like yesterday or something, like fully
Yeah,
released or something. Yeah,
Pretty
yeah,
quick.
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Something
So
like that. I don't know whether it was yesterday or a couple of days back,
yeah,
but
it wasn't long
recently,
ago. So
yeah, I mean, and people have been playing with it, especially the
lattice guys.
core mud guys, the
Yeah,
lattice guys
yeah.
themselves have been playing it for longer,
Mm.
and most of their games are already running on their own action. Uh, Another question which I had, and this is probably a more generic question, is I see this term L3 being thrown out around a lot, and
Mm.
I've seen more than one definition of it. What is, in your opinion,
Ah.
an L3? Yeah,
Uh, well, I'd say it could be a state channel that's running on an L2.
yeah,
It could be a app specific um, chain running on an L2. That's really what it is.
mm,
It's like some other layer that's it could be have a different data availability to the L2 itself. So it could you could just be doing um, you could have your L2 and then you could have your L3, and your L3 could be running just like on an AWS server or something, using some cryptography. And then when the game session finishes, everything settles back onto L2. So you kind of get this massive throughput layer for like a period of time, but then ultimately everything settles. Um,
so
uh,
so it could, so it's in your, I mean, the way you're describing it, and if I'm understanding it correctly, it's like another recursive layer to the L2 itself,
exactly, yeah,
and then
it's a
it
recursive
settles
layer.
back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's and that's one of the reasons why I find StarkNet so appealing is that you
Mm,
can do these recursive proofs
mm,
because you can actually run a prover on StarkNet, and so you can actually then create you could run your own L3 that creates, and so you can create your own verifier on on StarkNet, and you could
mm.
actually then create a set of proofs on your L3 and then verify them on and settle them onto L2, which is kind of crazy.
Have,
And then that settles back onto L1, and
mm,
so you get this like hyperscale.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Have you seen at all the work by this guy called Fraser, who was involved with the Lattice guys as well? And he did what he calls battle roll-ups, where
Yeah,
he
yeah. No,
was,
I heard
yeah,
about him. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that's like exactly the same that
yeah.
same
So
idea.
that's physics, yeah,
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's definitely where everything's heading
yeah,
with on-chain gaming because it's even L2s like you're still that like the design space in L2s is still limited. Like
mm,
L1 you can do like this much, L2
mm,
you can do like, this much. And then
mm,
L3, if you really break it down and make things like super super cheap and then like add in
mm,
tick mechanisms and stuff, then you can create
yeah,
these like very very rich gaming experiences. But still L2s you're still constrained. Um
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so that, yeah, and like since you brought up the ticking thing, I've seen a couple of guys do ticking things, and I was trawling around on your Telegram, and I think you guys are also trying to do something around the ticking side as well, isn't it?
Yeah, so well, we've um yeah, so in Eternum, the Realms game, we have a 12-hour ticking cycle.
Yeah.
It could be reduced, but it actually takes quite a bit of compute to like run that tick. So like you
Mm,
don't want to run it, you know, every 10 seconds. I mean,
mm,
I just set it at 12 hours now. We can reduce it, but basically I've got a callback function on every like function that you can call on your realm. And so, like, if you build an army, or if you harvest, or you do farming, or anything, it calls this callback. And if the tick is past that 12-hour, then that callback call gets called, and like it adjusts the state of your realm according to some parameters. So, like, right now it's just set up on happiness. So, like, if you fall, like, if you don't keep your realm happy, um, and the tick cycle ticks over, and then the next transaction that you do, you know the callback will know that you're not happy, and then it will actually adjust the state. And right now your army starts deserting if you haven't kept your realm happy. So
yeah.
if you leave your realm for like 5 days, and you come back and you had a full army before you left, your army gets degraded at 15% every 12 hours. So like whatever that is.
That's what the tick will do.
Yeah, that's what the tick does. It just reduces, so your army starts deserting. So then you come back, your army might be at like 30% health or something. So that's like what we're kind of testing it on. But like obviously the more stuff you put into that tick, the more compute it takes and the bigger the cost that function will be. So you'll still hit that constraint. So you still have to be careful. You can't just go nuts and put everything in there.
Yeah.
So
I think there is a guy who did the ticking chain on the lattice side, and they are doing it per block. What they have done is they
yeah,
have
exactly, yeah. So that they've like built it into the actual
get
like into Geth, and it calls like a function. It calls a contract on every block, which is the tick. And yeah, so that led us to like so this whole tick cycle. I mean, that's like how normal games work, right? It's like you have Call of Duty. It works on like a milli-split-second tick cycle, and most like traditional games do. It's just with blockchains we have to like we can't because they're not like they don't run unless you make a transaction, right? Well, the state doesn't change unless you make a transaction. That's the interesting property about them. So it means you have to come up with these creative ideas. But yeah, the thing you mentioned. So like we're building Realms of Turnum, and the next game we're building is called Adventurers, which is like this very low. We've been we've been designing and building this for quite a while now, but it's like a very low area barrier to entry like character in this world. So like it might cost like $5, $5 or $10 to buy one of these things, and they have like permadeath, and you can start you can like crawl dungeons, and you can get loot, and you can equip them, and you can run them on realms, and they can potentially be part of the realms army in the future. But designing, I mean, you guys would have learned this, but like designing these games, when you go kind of go to this path and you make all these contracts and design this stuff, and you realize when you look back of it, you're like, okay, I should have done that differently. But that's the nature of any software, right? The second time you write it, it's always better. And uh, and so I back in December, I gathered up a bunch of other StarkNet projects. So there's the cartridge guys, the bricks guys, a couple others, and we decided to kind of build this new open source organization called Dojo, which is building a Cairo 1, which is like the new StarkNet programming language. It's Cairo, but it's very heavily inspired by Rust, and it's completely different. So if anyone is actually interested in picking up Cairo, now's the time, as Cairo 1 is starting to get more mature. And it's very, very similar to Rust. So any Rust devs will find it quite nice. But we decided to build this new on-chain toolchain called Dojo, which is built around Cairo 1, Rust, and WebAssembly. And yeah, there's basically every StarkNet team that's building games is in there, and we're all kind of contributing to this engine, in the hopes that if we all put our minds together and build this thing, we can really create this like next gen engine that's running on StarkNet, or that could potentially even run on like its own L3. That's the kind of idea, is that we'll build this tool chain, and we're actually building it pretty closely with Starkware too. Like the actual Cairo, I saw this morning, the actual Cairo inventor is commenting on things, which is pretty cool. So it's a very closely tied project with Starkware itself.
Let's talk about UI a little bit. So one of the key things about having a game is the real-time feedback, and state changes on the blockchain can be a bit slower than what is typically acceptable on a game. So one of the things which most games, even traditional games, do is they do this thing called optimistic rendering, and then they fall back if things don't work. The Mud guys already have something along those lines. Do you guys have any sort of client which sort of does that, or do you have plans to build something along those lines?
Definitely, yeah.
With Dojo in particular?
Yeah. So yeah, we have a lot of plans to do that. Right now, Turnum doesn't have the optimistic state update. We're just focusing on a couple things. But there is there's a couple ways we're kind of approaching this. One of them is and this is still to be determined if this is going to work as expected. But basically, there's this within Dojo. Dojo is not just Dojo is basically a set of contracts plus also a set of infrastructure. It's like it's similar in mud in that respect. It's like a total tool chain for building games. Um, but the actual the systems part of it, we're planning on actually running a Starknet instance, in a container, and with a proxy controller where you submit transactions, and it also when you submit a transaction, it sends it to the Starknet DevNet, which is kind of like the optimistic network, and it also sends it to Starknet this transaction, so it's like a forwarder, and the client will actually just listen to the DevNet's events, um, and then we also have this other you know it's like a it's called Apibara. It listens for events, and so Apibara is connected up to the DevNet, and it's also connected up to Starknet. And so Apibara just basically forwards on the events to the client, and because the DevNet's obviously running locally, well, it's not running locally, but it's not running on a live network. It'll respond a lot faster. It'll basically be instant.
Yeah.
It will then send the events, and Apibara just then listens for the event coming from Starknet. And if there happens to be like a reorg or something weird happen, then Apibara just then forwards the state change and the client updates accordingly if it has to. And so we think with that we can reduce the latency dramatically.
I think that's conceptually similar to what the mud guys are also doing.
Yeah.
They have a local EVM simulation
Mm,
to predict what will happen, and if
mm.
it doesn't match what actually ends up happening, then they have a mechanism
Yeah, yeah.
to roll back.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
some pretty interesting stuff going on right now with the whole virtual machines in WebAssembly. Um,
Mm,
because you can run like you can run the Cairo VM in the browser,
mm,
and you can actually run arbitrary contracts in it too. It's still pretty clunky and hard to do, but you can do it, and it's very very fast. Like it's almost instant, which is kind of insane. So I think um, that's definitely going to form a big part of every new stack.
yeah.
Is this idea of like running VMs in the browser in like a little package, because you can just like you can add it to it's all running in your localized browser, right? So there's no latency. But then there's obviously the question of like the state management between your VM and the remote um, chain. But yeah, it's just tricky technical problems.
Sean, I think I've spoken too much technical stuff by now. I think you can ask other stuff.
No, no, we can break it up a little bit. I mean, but Loaf,
Yeah.
in terms of your involvement in Bibliotheca, what's your sort of day to day? Are you mainly on the development side, or because I see you tweet a lot, do a lot of community management as well as like, are you just kind of wearing every single hat there is right now?
Yeah, I'm definitely wearing every hat. Um, there is. I spend most of my time developing. And then I just have a few Twitter rants here and there. But mostly developing client and contracts and kind of architecture stuff. So and just doing interesting experiments as well. So yeah,
Very cool.
that's my yeah definitely most of my time is spent developing. Have a look at my GitHub commits.
Yeah.
It's a Christmas tree. Um, yeah.
And what's it been like doing this project as a DAO, versus, what are the sort of pros and
Ah,
cons there?
yeah. It's like um, so like before this whole project, I'd been part of companies that started a company, and you know centralized organizations definitely have their perks. You can hire and reorganize the organization at speed, because it's centralized and it's managed by ultimately one person. So you can move at a lot of velocity, but you're still constrained because you're limited by your headcount, then you're limited by your capital. Um, Now, obviously, if you have unlimited capital, maybe that's a bit different. But still, you hit limits with your coordination in big organizations. Just look at Google. Um, um, yeah, but and when starting this project, we just decided we're like, okay, let's just do the whole DAO route and like do it as a true DAO, and like everything, most things get voted on. Any major decisions gets voted on. Obviously, as the core team, we were kind of given guidance, and we told everyone what we're going to do, and they get trusting us to deliver this first version of the game, with the budget. But yeah, it's definitely tricky working in a decentralized environment when everyone, you know, when everyone's in different time zones, and some people aren't working full time, some people are working full time. You move a little slower than if it was just all centrally managed. So there's definitely some tricky things there. But I think overall, you can get like serious output, um, if you really lean into what a DAO is. Like I see a lot of like projects that are like trying to be pseudo DAOs. Like they're like ultimately a company, but they're a DAO. And I think if you try to do that, you actually get the worst of both. Like if you're trying to be a DAO, but then you're also having like a central, a very centralized, management style, then you actually get the best of you get the worst of both. I think as a DAO, you need to lean into and just like embrace the lateral nature of it, and just try to like encourage everybody part of the DAO, which is all the NFT holders or however the DAO works, to contribute. That's its strength.
Mm.
That's what a centralized organization can't compete with. They can't compete with like 2,000 people that are all aligned building on something. And that alignment might be like half an hour a week or whatever, but it's still significantly more than a team of like two people, 2 or 3 people. um, and so yeah, I think you need to really lean into what a DAO is, and not try to be like a pseudo. It's like either be a company and just like hire and fire it with velocity and be a centralized organization,
Mm.
and like do what centralized organizations are best for, or be a DAO and leverage like the lateral size of the organization.
Yeah, and I guess, no matter if it's a centralized entity or a DAO, you need to get the right people on board, right?
Oh
Like you
yeah,
said, if you just get number go up people, then they're not going to chip in, even if it's a fully decentralized DAO, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
I mean, we just saw how bullish your community was on your recent raise, so congrats on that to get
Thank you.
a
Yeah.
bit more runway to build out the vision. And I
Mm.
think you guys like subscribed in like a few hours, right? Just from your own little community. So
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I mean, bullish on-chain games, right? Everyone, the meta's turning. Um,
We didn't ask you why did you choose to go down the path of on-chain games. I mean, like from DeFi and on-chain games are like a little bit of a divergent path, isn't it?
yeah, well, I
And like
wasn't like,
crypto.
I never really built anything with DeFi. I come from like a, economics, um, not traditionally trained in economics, but I find economics very interesting. A armchair economist, you could say. Um, but that's I found DeFi fascinating because you just get this like speed of light capital flow anywhere in the world, and you can really get a lot of capital efficiency. I never really did anything specifically in DeFi, other than just invest in things. But on-chain games, I'm a long time gamer, all around nerd. So building a decentralized organization, that you know tried to really push the limits of what you can do on chain just was appealing. So you know, that's why I'm doing it. You know,
Yes.
I think this like design space is so interesting,
Yeah.
and no one's really cracked like what like what's the best case, what is the best type of on-chain game. I think we're just in this ideation stage right now where we need to like just try everything. You know,
mm.
that's why yeah, I mean, I support anybody doing anything. And to be honest, anybody building in this space that's not a rug, I respect, because they're building in this space is very hard. So,
Yeah, I mean, we speak to some people in the traditional game dev industry, and we've come to the realization it's like trying to build a game with all your limbs tied behind your back, and then
yeah,
and then trying to you've got the same challenges as a traditional game in that you have to be fun and engaging and all that stuff, and then you've got the tech on top to try and make all of that work.
yeah, I know it's I was talking to Pillhead, Pillhead. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, we were talking the other day, and he was like, yeah, it's building games in nightmare mode. Like, I thought that was quite good. Yeah.
No, it's pretty good.
I mean,
Um,
like you have to solve, you have to literally rewrite all the physics.
Yeah. But like, tell me a bit more about your guys' game. I mean,
I can
I
show you. You
yeah,
want to show me? Do you want me to show you?
yeah, please.
Okay, let me show you.
Actually just released a little game devlog about 30 minutes ago with
Oh,
some
what?
new progress. So, but I think
Can you see my
Maresh's got
screen?
a live thing
Yeah,
going on.
Let's hope the demo gods don't
Oh,
push us.
demigods.
So this is the game board. I mean, like this will progressively change, increase, improve. So there is Earth at the center, and there are these asteroids and people, and these are all space stations. So this is a residential space station. This is a go down. This is a harvester. This is again. There are different factions. There is Russia. There is China. Then uh, the objective of the game is to make as much money as possible by mining these asteroids and also help the people of your country to escape into space, and we keep on adding more layers to the game. So these asteroids
Cool.
are procedurally generated when you initialize. So these are randomly placed around the map. They have minerals and they have fuel as well. So you can basically build any of these 4 buildings. So I'll try to build something over here. And this is all on
We're
chain.
just on L1 Gnosis at the moment, so stuff's
Yeah,
really
we're
slow.
using Gnosis XStar. So we built a residency station at this location. Now I can upgrade it if I want. So it has 1 docking quarter. I can upgrade it. And then it will have 2. I can upgrade it further. Okay. Yeah, it worked. Yeah. So we are in the process of implementing an optimistic UI.
Cool.
That should be done soon. So you can upgrade to level 8. This is a residential station, which means that people can live in here. And the earth is no, yeah, clicks. So now I can basically rapture people from earth.
Rapture.
So I'll rapture 2 people. And what it does is it sends a spaceship from Earth to your thing, and now 2 of your docks are occupied. I can. So this is an asteroid. Okay, I want to mine this asteroid. So this is my harvester ship. I'll move this guy closer so that I can actually mine it, and I'll confirm, and it sends it over here. UI needs to be improved, but it works. Now I can start mining this asteroid. I can harvest it. I can. I think
Nice.
this harvester is already full. So there are a bunch of functionalities. I can attack people.
Yeah, so we're starting off as like well, initially it was a board game, inspired by this, board game and inspired by Dark Forest to a certain extent. And now we want to move towards more of a traditional RTS where we can have buildings and units. But ultimately, what Maresh and I love to do and play and think is a great fit for blockchain are like story generator games, right? Like Dwarf Fortress and RimWorld. So we want to be able to zoom in to one of the stations eventually and have people that you manage and they can have
Little stories and everything.
exactly little stories and the logs are all recorded on the chain and that's how we can sort of
God,
build it out.
amazing. Yeah, you're gonna use GPT for that?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Probably, yeah. So you can
Amazing.
upgrade. You can fire missiles at each other. You can destroy each other. Keep mining, build new stations, etc., etc. Generally, stuff works. We are fine tuning everything.
Nice.
Hopefully, we'll have some sort of an closed alpha in a week or 2, maybe
Nice.
another 10 days at least till we get to a closed alpha. And
Yeah, definitely get you
after
in
this,
there to play with us.
if
I
you
think
want,
you'll have some great feedback as well.
Yeah, definitely. To get me in there, send me a link as soon as it's want me to have a go. And how many players in like is it like a lobby based game?
So we haven't actually tested the upper limits, but theoretically, unlimited people can join in.
In one play cycle, one world.
In one world, because what happens is what we do is initially the build space is limited, so it's like only 30 orbits over here. And what we do is every time a new player joins in, what we do is we increase the buildable area by
Cool.
expanding it, and we initialize new resources. These asteroids are all dynamically initialized whenever a new player joins in.
Right.
So
Cool. That
uh,
looks like a lot of fun.
yeah. I mean, like we did couple of internal playtests, and then we came to the conclusion that okay, we need to add some more features to improve the depth of the game, so
Yeah.
that people can do more than one thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we are currently focusing on, because early on the game was, I mean, we had a full cycle
Yeah.
where people could just buy resources at the extremities and send it inwards, make money, and then buy weapons and then just go at each other.
Mm-hmm.
But now we came to the conclusion that okay, we need to allow more things. We need
Mm-hmm.
to have different classes of ships. We need different
Yeah.
ways of making money.
Mm-hmm.
But our ultimate aim really is to go towards some sort of a story generator, as Sean mentioned. And if we can become anything close to Rimworld or Dwarf Fortress, that would be awesome.
So
Amazing.
speaking of AI, I know you guys are quite bullish on using
Mm-hmm.
generative AI for artwork and stuff. What's that process look like for you guys? Like what's the workflow?
Yeah, so we're using it in a bunch of things. We have definitely still refining the process. Like, this is one of those things where like like there's probably a new model around the corner every 2 weeks.
Hmm.
And like we actually like 6 months ago, ages ago, we decided we actually use Stable Diffusion to create battle reports for our on-chain battles, and they get posted in the Discord. But Stable Diffusion isn't like it's okay. But then Midjourney 4 comes along, you're like, oh shit, this is awesome.
Hmm.
Like we need to step up our game, and so now. And then, when Midjourney 4 came around, we're like, okay, let's just. I think I skinned the entire game in a weekend. I was like, can I do this? So I just tried to do it, and I created a whole new like set of assets in one day for the game. And so we're using Midjourney for like the kind of premium static assets within the game. So like the buildings and units and whatnot. Um, but you can't really use Midjourney for like dynamically produce things
Hmm.
because it doesn't have an API endpoint yet, and it's just too expensive. I mean, they probably are going to open it up eventually, but it's pretty proprietary. So we've been actually we've been training our own Stable Diffusion model, which we just host, and then we just call it from wherever we want to call it. And like actually right now, we're the Adventurers game that I was explaining before. That we're going to be we're training a custom model for that. So every adventure minted will actually have its own like unique avatar and around it, which will when they die, that'll just get lost forever. That adventurer would have lived and then died.
Hmm.
Obviously, the image isn't on chain, but I mean, like I'm like I want to put everything on chain that like needs to be on chain, but
Yeah.
like I'm happy to reference an image ID to something else, like if they have like a skin, right? It's like a headless game. You can put whatever skin, like
Hmm.
Eternum, for example, like you could skin it as a space game if you wanted to, and it would be a space game. It's just skinned as like this, Age of Empires style game right now.
Hmm.
That's what I hope to happen in the future. Like someone come along and be like, okay, I'm just going to use Midjourney for a weekend. I'm going to replace all the assets and do a fork, and then now it's a space game. Now I'm fighting over, asteroid resources, or I'm using um, I don't know, some kind of space worm to attack my enemy rather than a knight.
Yeah.
I don't know, but it's like you can do all this crazy stuff now that the game's like headless because there's the game and then there's the client, right? So
Hmm.
you have this like multi-client style thing going on.
Yeah. And that's one of the big parts of being on chain, right? It's got this life that can take on its own. People can just fork your repo and off they go.
Are
Exactly.
you
Yeah.
guys keeping your UI open source as well, or just the contracts?
Yeah, everything's open source. Look, I have to admit, like where it's because it's such a work in progress. It's probably like um, it's the documentation isn't as maintained as I'd like, to be honest. Just because it's like if you change something, then you got to go change the documentation. Like it's trying to move so fast,
Hmm.
Yeah.
it's hard to like maintain both. And so I think once we have a more stable, the UI is kind of becoming a lot more stable now.
Yeah.
As we've implemented a lot of things, and like it's a gigantic React app at this point. Um,
Yeah.
But yeah, everything is open source. You just go to our organization repo, and everything's there. It's a bit of a minefield and maze, but if anyone's interested that's listening, just
Yeah,
pop
yeah. I
into the
mean, like our
Discord.
documentation is basically non-existent
Yeah,
right
the documentation is important, but like
now. No,
you
no,
don't
I
want to
get it.
spend a
Yeah,
week doing it, and you're like, oh shit, I've changed something. That
yeah,
documentation's mute,
exactly.
so
No
it's
longer
like
relevant,
yeah,
really.
it's no longer relevant, and you've spent a week doing it. I think that's the other thing that I've learned building these things. It's like because I created smart contracts for a while. You create smart contracts in a way where like um you write very, very tight unit tests. You're taking everything is watertight from the get-go. Um, but in a game, it's like, well, I'm going to make something, and like if it doesn't work, well, it doesn't work. But like
Yeah,
if you spend the time optimizing something too early, like a
yeah,
like a module, and you're
yeah,
like, oh, hang on, that module sucks. I'm not going to use it. You've spent like 2 weeks trying to optimize it, but you should have just sprint it out in like 2 days. It might be you know a bit loose in its security, but like
mm.
if it's good and if it's fun, then spend the
Then you can
time
tighten it. Yeah,
optimizing it. But like,
yeah,
don't
I
waste
agree.
time pre-optimization in games, on-chain
Mm.
games. I've learned that lesson.
No, no, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, just like sprint a module out, test it as fast as possible. Is it good? If it's good,
Mm.
you know, do the tests and do tight tests, get security going and whatnot. But
One last question from me is when and how early did you start doing open testing, or like have third parties or like people who are not part of the team start testing your game, try out your game?
So like the team's been testing it for a while. I definitely would have liked to have it done sooner, but Starknet definitely held us up. I was
Mm,
definitely way too optimistic about how quickly it would be ready.
mm,
And I've had to do a bunch of rewrites to keep it up to date. And so I think for like the last 3 months we've been kind of testing. The game itself is like, as you guys just alluded to, you play something and you realize, okay, it needs a bit more depth.
mm,
So like in the testing phase we're doing right now, we're kind of testing a lot of infrastructure, um, uh, testing the client, testing bugs, testing UX, testing like the raw physics of it all, like the resource production, building armies, etc., and like all these like base layer stuff. Because if that's all right, then you can build stuff easily on top. But if that's all broken, then you can't build anything on top. So,
mm.
so yeah, we're just kind of focusing right now on this like like the core economics and like the core physics of the game, and then keep adding complexity. Working on a pretty interesting module at the moment, actually. Um, just tying everything together. Because like with an on-chain game, like I mean, our game technically is meant to last forever. Like so we call it an eternal game. Like it's not going to stop.
Mm,
There's no like defined end like to the game. Like
mm.
you can't like win it. Like you can like dominate it for a while, but you can't like. There's no like win end. There's no like win condition.
Yeah,
And so the tricky part is, well, wrapping all the mechanics up into like a short driving push for a player to but then like repeating that. So yeah, it's a tricky problem, but that's what we're doing. What we're doing
Hmm.
because we didn't do it because it was easy.
you're in
Um,
Sydney, right?
yeah,
Yeah, awesome.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, if you ever come down to Melbourne, give it a shout.
yeah. I'll do that. I think I'm going to be pretty locked down for the next few months because I'm having my wife's having our first child
Hmm.
in a
Oh,
month.
congratulations. Yeah,
Congratulations. Yeah, that's big
congratulations.
news.
So I had a bit of FOMO not going to Starkware sessions last week. But I was all locked down. So, but
Hmm.
yeah,
Hmm.
exciting times.
No, absolutely.
I
And
have a
what?
6-year-old, so
Ah,
yeah, good
nice,
fun.
good fun.
Look at that joy on his face.
Nice.
No, it is a lot of fun. It's a lot of work, but let me not scare you beforehand.
Mhm. No, no, don't worry. Everybody that's got kids keeps telling me the same thing. So,
Well, yeah, I think that was a great conversation, definitely. And Google's telling us we're running out of time anyway.
yeah,
But
right on.
yeah, is there anything you'd like to say to uh, anyone who might watch this video, including the people who are interested in loot realms, how they can contribute? Like, what's something you'd like them to do?
Yeah, I mean, now, like, if you've been considering on-chain games, like, now's the time. It's this early a period where we're all experimenting, everyone's friends, everyone's trying to help each other. Like this is like the start of like it's the start of this like crazy new medium to build things on. So it's never been a better time to start getting stuck in. And if you're interested in Loot Realms and Cairo and Starknet, and then just jump into the Discord. You know, ping me directly. I'll probably respond. I will respond. Or just look at our documentation and try to figure it out. But yeah, just if you are a builder, get it's time to build.
Time to build. Awesome. And on that, we'll wrap up for today. Thanks again, Loaf. Really good to chat to you, and no doubt we'll be talking with each other more and more as we both progress on our on-chain gaming journeys.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Thanks again.
Awesome. All right. Cheers, mate. Have a good one, and good luck with the baby.
Thank you.
Congratulations. See ya.
Cheers, mate.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.